Says starting. Okay, now we're in the March 11th BetaSaaSers, AutoGraders hangout, and as you can see, I'm outside. The weather's warm. I'm here with Rose, and Sam may join us. He says he has a cold, so hopefully
Oh, okay.
um, he'll pop in soon.
I,
And
I didn't get that email, by the way.
oh, you did not?
No, not that one. I got the one from yesterday, the day before, saying he would meet at the regular time.
Well, my, knowing Sam, I can't imagine that he did it, sent it to anything but BetaSaaSers.
Yeah,
I'm always afraid to send anything but there. So,
yeah.
um,
By the way, I've got a
yeah,
chart here on converting from UTC to Eastern Standard Time and Daylight Savings Time. And it says here to go from UTC to uh, Eastern Daylight Time, or I'm sorry, to Eastern Standard Time, you subtract 5 hours from
right,
UTC. All
which
right,
is where we are now.
right. If to go to Eastern Daylight Time, you subtract 4 hours.
So that would put us at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's happened occasionally.
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, good. Okay, and then we'll make sure, and we'll have to figure out when things change. When
Mhm.
things change for Sam.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, this meeting that the update that Sam came, he sent it at 8:30 this morning, and it was to the same mailing list that he sent his original message.
Really?
So yeah,
That's so weird. Huh. So I don't see it, but hey. Weird things are. The other thing that sometimes happens is somebody will send me an email and then hours or a day later I get it, which
yeah,
is so irritating. And I think it's got to do with the way that the academic mail is filtered. And sometimes there's mail I don't get at all. Like a couple of summers ago, I was getting some baby chicks from a breeder,
mm-hmm.
and apparently she had put chicks on the the
Ah,
subject. And so she kept on sending me mail, and I kept on not getting it, and I kept on wondering what's going on. Why have I sent you money? Why haven't I heard from you? Right? And then she's like, I'm trying to set up delivery here, and why aren't you responding? And so it was very bizarre.
very good.
Yeah.
I like that. So, um, anyway, but that probably wasn't the issue with Sam's email, so it may have just been a little delay. You'll probably get it sometime
Oh yeah,
next week.
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
Okay,
Okay.
so the issues I'm about to I'll be assigning homework 3, which is the cucumber, and
Right.
I've been through it a bunch of times. The
Sure.
last two ones are not my favorite for a
Hmm.
variety of reasons, and I think for some of the reasons that you may have brought up. So, but just as even like a little refresher for me, I'm happy to hear like whatever your experiences were with homework 3.
Hmm. They weren't that bad, although some things were a little like some explanations weren't very good. The biggest problem was that when students wrote tests that passed that
Right.
shouldn't have, all right, because they were basically testing nothing. Uh, the uh, the feedback from the autograder did not indicate that. In
Yeah.
fact, they were completely flummoxed by these responses, had no idea, why, for instance, they could locally get all their tests to pass, and then they would submit it to the autograder, and it wouldn't pass at all. Uh,
Okay.
but but when you looked at their code, it made perfect sense.
Right.
But you had to really look at it.
Okay. Now that's interesting, because that sounds like a known issue that's not clearly easily addressable. Now, so the issue
Yeah.
that you just described is where the AutoGrader feedback is essentially better than the local feedback. In other words, the local feedback looks like, oh yeah, everything's all green,
Mm-hmm.
and they send it to the AutoGrader, and the AutoGrader says, oh, not so fast, right? Is that what you're
Exactly.
describing? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason is the AutoGrader, in order to test that their tests are sensible, runs mutation tests.
Right.
So, for instance, it puts in uh, some legal but incorrect syntax changes into the well, I shouldn't say syntax. They're actually more semantic changes into their code, and of course, their code at that point should fail. Uh,
Well, it
you
forces.
know,
My understanding is it essentially forces the code to fail.
Well, the thing is, the code should fail, but the problem is it doesn't. And it doesn't because, in essence, they haven't tested things correctly. For instance, I'm trying to see an example of web steps
Well,
here.
right.
Um,
Okay. And I just need to clarify terminology. The
mhm.
code failing versus the test failing. What I'm saying is, my understanding is the AutoGrader forces the code, the application, to fail, and therefore the test needs to pick that up. So
Okay,
so if the
okay,
test isn't good enough,
yeah,
then the application knows it's giving the wrong. I mean, with the mutation testing, we know that it's supplying the application is supplying the wrong answer, and if the test is still happy, then the AutoGrader is not happy.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, but now the issue that I'm seeing is I don't see that as a failing of the AutoGrader. I actually see that as a benefit of the AutoGrader. I just don't see easily how we could pick that up for certain locally, because basically someone
Well, we can't.
locally could
We
could
can't.
write any application, any application just always returns true, and the test always looks for a return of true, and everything's going to look
Hmm.
hunky dory locally.
Right, right. And there's nothing you can do about that except to encourage students to make sure that their tests fail first, and they don't pass until they first failed, and even to force it to fail to ensure that you've got a test that is doing something.
Okay, now
The
and now
only other thing that can be
yeah.
done, and actually I've got a student working on that,
Wait. Whoa. Wait
is
a second.
what would
Wait a
be
second.
really helpful is
Okay.
that
Wait a
the
second.
sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Something. Wait a second. Okay. Sorry. It's not
No,
great.
that's fine.
I am. Something just came crashing down that almost could have been a
Oh my
disaster, but it
goodness. Are
wasn't.
you okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you
It's
okay?
it's something that happened right next to me. I'm out. There's some like cobbled together um, sort of fences to protect dogs, and I just needed
Oh,
to deal with
okay.
that.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
see. I
so
see.
yeah, so start
But
that last thing again. I'm sorry.
oh, okay. So the thing that could be done, as I said, is to encourage them
Right.
to put some code in there that should deliberately fail, and they should see a failing step, and if it doesn't happen, then they should investigate their code, and that's the only thing you could do locally. But as far as the AutoGrader is concerned, the AutoGrader could certainly have, spit out some kind of paragraph about mutation testing and
Yeah.
explain what it's doing, because the message they get is undecipherable.
Right. So what that means,
Yeah.
so two comments on the second thing. I'm comfortable with that being like our job security. In other
Hmm.
words, That's one of the points I make to my class is yes. Um, you may get confused that things are passing locally and not
Hmm.
by the AutoGrader, and
Right.
that means that it's basically saying your tests are not really detecting. I mean,
Yeah.
that
Anything.
right. The test has to do two things: detect when it functions correctly,
Yeah.
identify that, and then also it needs to test when it's not functioning correctly
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
identify that, because otherwise I could have a test that functions correctly always, my test says always pass,
Yeah.
and
I'll give
everything.
you. I'll give you a great example. And partly this was. Uh, I didn't do the test this way, but there was a hint in the assignment that said you could look at the number of rows in the table.
Mm-hmm.
And because at one point there's a test where you test all movies. All right.
Yeah.
And so they said you could look at the table and make sure that it has the right number of rows. Well, a lot of students were doing this. They were querying the um, the database. All right.
Okay.
Well, so they were looking at the original number of movies, right, and kind of hard coding the number of movies, and
Okay.
then they were querying the database and asking, does the database table have this many records in it?
Got it.
So, I mean, no matter what you choose, the database is always going to have that many records
Right.
in it because it's not the database that's being filtered. It's the HTML page, what's appearing on there, that's being filtered, right? So they had a test that always passed.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there were a couple of other common examples of that. Some of them just because students made some typos, all right, and so
Yeah.
they were actually comparing things to the wrong variable or something like that. And again, they were they had formulated a test that was testing a constant against something that would always be the same value.
Yeah.
Because, well, like for instance, one student, what they did is they went to the original HTML table, right, and counted the number of lines in the original HTML output, and of course the number of records in the database, and but then of course they're not checking what the HTML table is when you filter it,
Okay.
so
Right. So, but those are examples in which the AutoGrader is doing a
it's
good, if
it's doing an
cryptic
excellent job.
job,
Yes.
as opposed to some of the earlier issues that we had. Because I
Yeah.
know I have, there's a bunch of bunch of places where people can produce non-working code that the
Mhm.
AutoGrader, because it just does like a quick test or two.
Yes.
Um, doesn't really catch problems, and
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about that.
Yeah.
Now let me ask one other thing that you said, is that the student should make sure the test fails.
In
um,
other words, you can, if you know that
yeah.
you're testing that the number of, like, you're doing it in a way of counting records or something like that. All right. Uh, you could deliberately give it an incorrect value, and it should fail. And if it's not failing, then you
Well,
have a
let me
test
ask you
question.
this: is that normally, for the way that you're suggesting, normally that someone would write the test before the code has been implemented,
Yeah.
or before it's been implemented correctly. The test fails, and then
Yeah.
they either implement or fix the implementation, and then make the test pass.
Hmm.
How are things set up? I cannot remember in homework 3. Are we adding tests after the correct code has already been implemented, or are they adding the test before that? Do you
Yeah. See,
understand what I'm
that's
asking?
exactly, and that I think is the why we run into so many problems with
Because
homework.
the code is working.
Code is already there and
Yeah.
working. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in certain cases, when students had run into this problem, in order for them to kind of be enlightened, I suggested, well, take that code and change the code to this, and does your test fail? And in fact, their test would pass, and I would say, doesn't it seem like there's something wrong with that? And
Yeah.
then they would find what their, it was usually, just either a typo or a bad assumption.
Okay. Do you happen to know offhand, or this could be something that we either need to look up or write up, is
Mm.
what the mutation test is doing exactly? Again, I used to know that. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just as you described. It's, changing some pieces of code so that the test should always fail. And if the test doesn't fail, that,
Whoa. Let me get back to. Yeah. So, and it's just figuring out exactly what that is. At some point, I should look into that, or one of us, just in case that's helpful to the students. But most of the time, when
oh,
we
I
tell
think
the
so.
students, like that, it's basically, your test has to fail. If the result isn't correct, that's good enough for them to
Yeah,
run with.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But and
Um,
did you see my walkthrough? I put a walkthrough up for 3.
I saw that you put one up because it's a little bit ahead of me.
Yeah,
I haven't looked through it yet, but I will expect over the next week or so. That walkthrough, that's up on GitHub in that community sort of
yeah,
area that he said. Am I correct about that?
yeah. I don't know if it's going to stay up there. I thought that was the directory or the repository that was private.
I'm not sure that he made it private. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think because he got back to me, and apparently it's not private.
Yeah.
Now you kind of have to know about it, but I think that people could get to it. So there was some issue with that. I'm hoping he made it private because I don't know. It just seems like I thought that repo was for us.
Yeah, and we will have to talk. And again, that's a Sam issue
Yeah.
because Sam has a philosophy of keeping most things public as much as
Hmm.
possible. So
Yeah.
we'll have to,
Right.
so I wouldn't be surprised if it's public at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't disagree with him, but I think as far as a complete and total walkthrough, that maybe, that
Yeah.
should be
Well,
private.
I have an odd thing. I'm using public GitHub,
Uh-huh.
and I'm asking my students to post their work and work in progress there, and
Yeah,
it would be very easy for anyone to like
yeah,
electronically look and cheat, and
yeah.
I'm just not dealing with that right at the moment.
Yeah, I'm doing some similar things because I'm having each student work with as many other students as possible, work with me, etc. And I'm just not being all that concerned about if they're unsure, that they get an answer. I'm being a little more a little more focused on uh, once it's explained to them, do they understand it? Can they do it again? And are we sort of short-circuiting um, not the frustration that they should experience, but kind of an overwhelming sense of frustration where they're not getting anywhere because they don't understand some key concept, and it's really simple to explain.
Yeah,
Once you know that, oh well, you're confusing this with this, then it's like, oh okay, so they can move on.
yeah. So I'll take a look through that walkthrough,
Yeah.
possibly by next meeting. I'll try and do that, and then but if there's anything that I have questions, we'll use the email. So
Yeah, sure. And
what?
I just about got another one done too on 4.
Great.
And did you look through chapter 8? You know that updated chapter 8
No,
that
no, I have definitely haven't. That's ahead of where I'm at.
yeah, okay, because I found that there were still some examples that used the old syntax. Not
Hmm.
only that, but what I thought was more serious is it still talks about using spec helper everywhere. And when I followed the instructions for homework 4 and started up and tried to proceed, I couldn't get anything to work.
Yeah.
And I started looking online and at a bunch of stuff. And basically they're saying with RSpec now, you no longer require RSpec helper. You have to require RSpec Rails.
Yeah.
And that's not mentioned. Not only that, but when you download the homework for, it's not mentioned in the chapter, but when you download the homework for,
Yeah.
it's still requiring spec helper, not Rails helper. There's no discussion of it whatsoever, and immediately everything's failing. So in the .rspec, that hidden file, I changed it from require spec helper to require Rails helper, and then no problem. But
Okay.
they wouldn't have known to do that.
Well, the interest, I'm wondering if you were pulling it from the latest repo or
I
whether
was
it was in the
pulling it.
instructions. Yeah.
I was pulling it from the HW-BDD TDD cycle repo, which is the one Sam said is the one, and that's the one that when you go from edX, and it says go here, that's where it sends you.
Okay.
So it had to have been that one.
Yeah.
It had to have been the correct one. And then also, when I pulled it down, and I did this several times because I was really surprised, and just to verify it, it comes with an orphaned migration. It's like extra value added.
Okay.
And that really, really shouldn't be. So, I mean, I can't imagine starting someone off with an application that has an orphan migration as part of it. That makes no sense.
Well, probably, it sounds like, apart from posting your walkthrough when you find these things, emailing them to the list and getting explicit answers. It doesn't look like Sam is going to join us, and even if he was, it would be worthwhile to have
Yeah.
these documented in writing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's all in my walkthrough, which should be up in a little while.
Okay, that's
I
good. And
haven't I haven't
you may want to
complete. I
flag
I
out
did it as like a discussion, and I showed what I saw and what I did, etc., etc.
Okay, but all I'm saying is if you just post it there, and if no one looks at it, especially Sam or maybe
Yeah.
Armando, then
Yeah.
no one will know. So follow
Yeah.
up with the
I'll
post
make a list
for sure.
and post it on
Right.
BetaSaaSers. Yeah. Good idea. Excellent
Okay.
idea.
So what
Yeah.
I'll do now, um, let's just go through this. I don't think there's going to be too much, but just for the
Yeah.
purposes of our meeting, we can go through and then see if there's anything to get done and follow up from there. Um,
Right.
the AutoGrader stuff. Yeah. The
Yeah.
main thing um, with the AutoGrader is I don't know a way since these AutoGraders are locked into the edX framework, and there may be a staging AutoGrader that we can point to differently. I just don't know of a way that we can all sort of, share our AutoGraders, because in a sense, like if I
Mm.
want to do something a little different or add some tests, I'm deathly
Yeah.
afraid of like changing things and then
Sure.
breaking things for the
Oh, I
you know
agree.
the
You know what I did this semester in my graduate class? I suggested that at least one student join the AutoGrader team and
yeah.
work on it, and I got a really good student to do that. So we're in discussion, he and I and Sam, with what can we do with the AutoGrader to make it more clear what the AutoGrader is doing, and perhaps to provide some better messages that point students in the right direction. And he's kind of verifying that the AutoGrader is doing what it should. Uh, so I mean, I wonder if that wouldn't be a helpful thing for all of us to do.
Yep, but it requires, sort of effort and cooperation and coordination. So,
Well, this is his project this
yeah,
semester. Instead of doing something else, his project is that he's merging into the AutoGrader team as if he just got hired by them.
okay. But my only concern about that is I'm not quite sure who on the Berkeley side is really, you know, focused in who he's working with. But I'm curious to hear how, how is that going? Is he interacting with Armando and the TAs and all that? I'm skeptical.
At this point, he's interacting with the TAs and with Sam.
Okay. Because my understanding, speaking with the TAs, is they were like not really actively involved, the Berkeley TAs. So they might be there for answer some questions, but it didn't seem like they were really actively working on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that on a per semester basis, they probably don't work on a whole lot of stuff. But this kind of gives us some visibility into it and allows us to, just have some leverage.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of other things. Let's see what else is here. Sam sent a message to me and Janet about our Part 2 Spocks. So it looks like he's making progress on that. He just wanted to validate some information. The editors.
Yeah, I did get mine, so I'm working on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The C9 editor synchronicity. I don't think. What I was looking for was if someone leaves out the -M option for them to be popped into the C9 editor. I don't think that's in the cards the way the C9 editor works. Even whatever research I've done. So so be it.
Yeah.
What was this? The homework 3 solution. Did
Well,
we?
again, this is just that this is being given to instructors, etc. And you look at the solution, and let me bring up this file. I mean, it's just silly, okay? And I'm just saying, if we're going to have a solution, how about one that actually is sensible?
Yeah.
Let me just share this. Okay. So again, it's not that it's wrong. It's just ridiculous. Here we have the when I check the following ratings do rating list, right? And then they don't use rating list. Then they just hard code, which is not a good idea, what the list is instead of getting it. All right. And it's like, how stupid is that? Boy, that's a kludge, right? And I'm just saying, let's not have kludgy code in our solutions.
So this will
because
so they have a solution that will pass the AutoGrader, but is not really.
well, it's not that it's incorrect. It's just that you shouldn't be hard coding this stuff. I mean, you're supposed to be taking the rating list and using it, not and if you're not pulling up all of these in this test, then there's something wrong somewhere. All right, so I'm guessing that someone had a difficulty, and then they short-circuited the whole thing by just, I'll just hard code this and the hell with it, instead of thinking it through. And it's not a difficult solution. It's just, why is this done this way? It's silly.
Okay, point taken.
Yeah. Again, not earth-shattering, not.
Okay. So last week, Sam did some things to make the AutoGrader possibly more reliable, and I haven't been using it actively, but we'll report back if that's.
Well, he kept on having trouble with homework 4, and some of my students got into trouble when they were doing things in the database, maybe perhaps not in the right order or whatever, but they got into trouble where things weren't working and they got it kind of backed into a corner. And I'm just wondering if that couldn't be a side effect of having that crazy orphan migration in there. And maybe there's a problem not only with what he was saying about the timeout, but maybe somehow in some cases there's some kind of combination of things happening because of that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, now, but have people still been experiencing problems since Sam made the change?
No, I don't. No, they haven't.
So okay. So
although he mentioned some other problems, so I don't know.
Okay. I posted this next, I just identified, and again, this we can talk about another week.
Hmm.
But when I'm editing the instructions, I find at least three categories of changes. There's obvious typos that I'll fix. There's
Yeah.
stylistic changes that others may not
Hmm.
want or care about, and then there are
Hmm.
changes that I make for my class in particular. And what I don't know how to do is handle that in a way that I can make my changes that other people may
Yeah.
want and keep my
I had the same
other changes
question.
separate.
Yeah, I had the same question. Personally, I think it would be great if we could have, take about 10 minutes in a meeting and sort of look at what we should do when or in what cases should we submit a pull request, full blown, and in what cases should we just throw in a correction, and what are the correct steps in each case
Right.
to follow so that we don't screw something up.
Right. So my issue is that most of my changes are in the latter two categories. So I wind up again just for expediency, just making the changes and keeping them, for myself. Because
Yeah.
so that was just following up on Sam. Okay. The
Hmm.
other stuff, test coverage, I think we talked about for especially for homework 3. This is from last week, I remember, and then the daylight saving time. So,
Right. And as far as the paths testing, I'm going to have to address that next week because I had midterms this week and I just didn't get around to scanning it.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, I think I'm going to like sort of beg off. We're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, because it looks
Exactly. And I've got a ton of stuff to do.
okay. So, Sam, we miss you. If
Yeah.
you're hearing this, and I brought
Hope,
out
hope
some
you're well.
sunshine. I brought out sunshine to help him with his cold, but I guess um, I'll have to bottle it up some other way.
Yeah. Well, he can listen to the recording and listen to the bird song, which is just wonderful.
Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll catch you next week, and we'll hear from email before then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
take care.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
You take care too. Bye.